plan. How did all that strike everybody? What is it defining?
Well, firstly, I wanted to apologize to you because you had brought up the option of the county manager, and I think my words were, I think that's a little too hardcore. And really, to be as open as possible, I think is important, and to consider that too. And reading through it, it was just really interesting how similar the different forms are.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
They're very similar, it's just level of authority.
And I tried to imagine how each of them would work in our culture, in our county culture, or both within the organization as well as outside of it in the community, how that works. You know, my thought was that hiring a manager would require incredible confidence and trust in that individual. There's still the board oversight, but to have that hire fire without board approval is just a next level of, and that was the only difference really that I could see, is to have that hire fire. Were there other differences that you saw?
Don has actually worked under all three forms of government.
Huh.
So he could actually tell you how it works, if you're interested.
Please, here.
Come on up here.
Join the podcast.
Have a chair.
Yeah, give us a little context.
Yeah, I don't know all of you. My name is Don Fair. I live in Tofty. Not born here, but I've been here about 20 years, so as you heard the other day. Yeah, I worked 37 years, 35 years in county government. I took 2 years out to work for Bloomington on a special project up there on the freeway with overpasses and things. I worked in Pine County on the first year. I worked in Washington County. And I'm so low in the pole, I don't even know kind of, this is the 70s anyway, probably doesn't pertain to much. Then in Pine County, where we had government like you had here before you started doing it, the administrators, like, you know, the county auditor basically was kind of the boss, but not really the boss. I think you're talking about, and they formally then adopted a coordinator form of government there, and the county auditor became the coordinator. You know, and it worked in a small county. I mean, if you call Pine small, I mean, it's bigger than this, but it's not, you know, it's a rural county. I left there and went to work for Ramsey County for a few years, in which my boss was the public works director, became the county manager in Ramsey County. It was a manager form of government. And I knew Paul real well, so I kind of don't. I was on the page with him, so I'm not sure. That is a strong form of government, I know that. It worked well there, but you know, you're talking about a whole different world than here.
Yeah.
Then I went to work for Pine County, and Pine. I was already there. I went on down to Scott County, and I spent about 20 years in Scott County, and that is an administrator. I'm not certain. I think the first county administrator came from Scott County. Joe Reese was the county administrator, and they had the Joe Reese Award amongst county administrators for the Administrator of the Year. So Joe Reese gets the Joe Reese Award.
Yep.
Joe, I went to work there when Joe was there. He left soon after. And then I think some of you may have met Dave Unlocked when you've been looking for administrators.
Yep.
He was my boss there, and a good friend from years ago. And you know that I don't know if I can help you with the idea, except that it's as it goes on out in the community. People tell me as I walk through the building coming here what they think about this whole discussion. But you know, if I contrast the two forms of Pine County, I was close enough to the administration there, and Scott County, which I was very much a part of the administration there. That administrator form to me was far superior to that coordinator. Coordinator didn't have any power, I don't think. I mean, you know, Larry Peralt. I think Larry Peralt was his name in Scott County, or I get my counties mixed up, in Pine County, and you know, he was a nice guy, and we worked our way through everything, but it's a kind of a weak form of government, I guess I would say. You probably know that from reading what you have. here. I worked under a number of county administrators. Deputy on my property is the best, you know. That's why he was out helping other people find administrators. In my experience would say, I think administrators are good for them. It just, I suppose the cameras are running there?
Yep.
I'm going to say that anyway. You have a huge challenge here because you're trying to change things in a very small, in many ways, small county, 5,000 people. But I'm surprised you don't have a room full of people if that's for this place, up for this conversation. It's just it's a challenge. And I've said to others, I've hired, I should say, I didn't hire them. I was part of the county when we hired folks from Cook County. Because it was a good training ground.
Mhm.
County engineers come here, they go down to the cities and they're deputy. And they make 50% more in pay. And
It's a good training ground because we get
Yeah,
them
that's-
often right out of school. We have previously had
Yeah.
incredibly low wages, and we got them in, and they had to work multiple jobs, as we heard in public health earlier, and so they had training across the board instead of in a large county where it was specified what they did. You know, and a lot of people say, well, we only have 5,000 people. I'm sorry, we don't only have 5,000 people.
25
We,
or 5.
you know, we have seasonal homeowners. That almost doubles the people that we have here. The decisions that we make impact the seasonal property homeowners. Not just them, but the people that visit here. The decisions we make affect people who also visit here. And we have over 120 employees. We have all of the departments and all of the requirements of any other county across the state. We just don't have 250 employees. So,
Well, yeah, I thought it was more supporting 150 employees with,
yeah, I mean, we have the seasonal employees where the numbers go up in
Yeah.
the summer and the different things.
And
And
then-
we hear constantly in public health and different things that we're unique. We are unique. There are unique things that we have to deal with. And we're not small town. We're not the middle of the state where we have the resources of other counties so close to us that can pull things together. We are really specialized and we need an experienced person to do that.
Well, yeah, so, thank you for making, hopefully you can shed more light on it, more questions, but where my thought process was going, if I could finish, was that the manager, that level of confidence and trust in a person we hire would need to be justified to have a need for that level of authority. I don't see that level of need with an organization of our size. Going to the other side with the coordinator, like you say, they have no power. They are mainly a facilitator. And every single thing has to come to the board to decide. And that, I think we've gotten to a level of complexity, just whether it be just the management of day-to-day operations or also coordination of other programs, other agencies, as well as having my desires to have a stable government. And I think the coordinator will quite bring that stability. I think the administrator is kind of that in between. And so that's where I'm landing, I think. But I want to stay open to other, input and feedback still.
It sounds a lot like Goldilocks to me. This is too hard, this is too soft, this is just right.
I'll use the word continuum.
Just
You know, you have the manager, I think there's only 2 counties that have managers, Ramsey and then another one. And, there's reasons for that, but they have just all authority for staffing. That's basically what it is. You hire, you fire, and the board stays out of it.
It's also
And the
size.
coordinator is the only way that worked here, and I don't know, maybe there's another way to make it work, but then you're just assigning authority to a county coordinator and paying them less, but have them work more, is to assign them to supervise the department heads. But I think that's what the practice that is taking place in our state, from what I could gather, is that when you have a county coordinator, they don't supervise the department heads. And then you look at consistency and checks and balances, well, and who does? Well, in the past here, the county commissioner, they took 3 apiece or something like that. Some didn't even bother to get feedback, I hear, and some really did a great job. Well, then you get really inconsistency, and accountability just goes right out the door. So, you know, I think that whole accountability and checks and balances kind of thing is something to consider. And I guess, you know, I don't see us going to manage her at all just because of our size. I think the public wants us to have more say in hiring, and especially if it comes to department heads.
So I'm going to ask a question. So clearly this has been an issue, people not sure which way they want to fall. What do you think are the specific problems that people feel uneasy about administrative form of government that maybe could be addressed in the way we approach it this time?
I'll give one response that I've heard, and I think I understand it. They think it's going to be cheaper. It's going to cost less money. I've met quite a few that have that rationale. Or
What's going to cost less money?
coordinate, you just pay less salary.
And that could be the case, and of course we want to keep our costs down. My concern is, where are our values? Are our values in a stable government, or are our values in a cheap government? And or you know, and that's maybe that's not fair to say it's that either or.
Less
but
expensive.
yeah, or even, you know, it's just kind of like, well, I really want a better organization, an efficient one certainly, but.
May I add something?
Sure.
The difference in pay between a coordinator and a manager in this county is going to be very small amount of money, very small amount of money. One good decision will save you that difference really. If you think about how much you're going to save $10,000, $15,000. It's real money, but there's a lot of decisions that management makes that can save you money or cost you money.
I know that one lawsuit can wipe out a lot of things. You've got to have someone who keeps that control. I believe that you get what you pay for. And whatever we do, it's the skill set, the qualities, and the leadership abilities of the person that's far more important. You could maybe get a coordinator that just wants to settle down and, you know, come and had a very big job someplace and say, oh yeah, I'll do it because I'm wealthy and, you know, but what are the odds of that? Very, very slim.
Well, and we're again dealing with the stability and the consistency and.
Yeah.
So.
And I think one of the areas that we want, and hopefully we'll be able to get that quality, is strategic planning.
Mhm.
A person would come in with skills that would help us move forward. We've started, but we need to move forward. And I don't know, you know, if a coordinator would have experience like that. So I'm not saying they wouldn't, but we have to decide what our values are, and, you know, we have some discussion guide here for when we meet with the consultant individually, and we aren't going to have the perfect person, but I think we have to say this is where our needs fall into, and then go from there with our decision as to who can fulfill that. Because we've had AMC role of administrator, so we have theirs. We have also the intergovernment structure, so we have a good background in terms of what other counties are, how other counties are supported, and options for how we look at ours, and I was looking at taking off the administrator and the manager. They pretty much all kind of fall into the same category with a few differences. But I think the administrator profile seems to look more in favor of how I would look at how our county would be run.
I'm just curious if there's anything about the defined administrator goal, you know, the way they define it and all this background that somebody wouldn't want in the next person. I'm not talking about personalities, I'm just saying the roles and responsibilities. There's something that you wouldn't want in those basic roles, because I think that helps inform it. Is that the basic structure, or is there something there that's too much, or is it still just right? I'm just curious how to get to that.
Well, I think the way to get to that is the contract. And I think if we decide, whatever we decide on that, we also should have a discussion about the contract. And I know we've made some interim modifications, but that contract is pretty important in the wording of it. So getting at those issues, that if we have some concerns, I think that would be the proper place to have a discussion on when we decide which way we're going to go.
So, I mean, we've already taken HR on a temporary basis anyway, and pulled that out. So we have an opportunity to see how that's going to work. And we know in the past, first with Jay and then with Jeff, that HR responsibility was a lot of responsibility in addition to everything else. So there's a decision there about going forward, more of an HR director or bringing that back in. But are there other roles
We're
that?
considering it in the highway department. When we approve that, if we do, then there will be a change there. That's being recommended from the committee.
I want to answer your question about, is it too much for an individual? The individual who thinks being the administrator of this county is a bigger load than they want isn't the person we want as a county administrator.
No, I'm not worried about that. I'm just wondering if there are things that we asked the last administrator to do that the board felt uncomfortable with, like they wished that it was being handled a different way. No, I agree with you, but this is kind of up to them, because there's been this sort of back and forth about, do we want this form of government or that form of government?
Well, this is, so in previous discussions, I recall hearing that the level of authority was too much. But looking at the roles spelled out in the statute, I don't see that as an issue. But I do think that it's important to keep the HR position separate. I think that maybe was a factor as far as the challenges of the position before, and maybe that led to the feeling of too much power in that position. I don't know. But it's seeming important to have that separation.
How does everybody else feel? Bobby, how do you feel about the HR position?
I think it should be kept separate.
Everybody else see it that way too? Good. Good. Consensus is good.
May I ask a question? When you're talking about keeping it separate, you mean you're going to have this HR department?
Yes.
It's only report through the administrator.
Yes, but before,
That's just the way it works.
but before,
He
It was the
he
job.
was the HR director as well.
That
Yeah.
makes sense.
Well, and for some smaller counties, that does make sense, but I just feel like our organization's gotten to a level.
150 employees.
Right, yeah, and just navigating, always changing, or not always, but there's a lot of turnover. And so managing that and just how we need to adapt and develop, I just feel like that's.
And HR is a real important thing for staff development, staff support, and
Yeah.
boy,
The culture.
and
Yeah.
skill sets.
Yeah.
I mean, there's specific training there that it doesn't necessarily fall under administration. administration, it could,
Yeah,
but it's pretty rare, and so
Yeah.
it's just a model that's going to work a lot better. If you can get the right person to do it,
yeah.
a qualified person. And we have that, I think.
It sounds like, I'm hearing positives from you about the manager form of government. I'll just add one thing, the manager form of government I was at, when they hired a manager, he went through the ranks. They didn't go outside and bring somebody new into that board. When I was at Renton, we had an administrator left, the deputy took over and left, and this deputy, who happened to be my boss, moved up the line, he was at Edmond County for probably 30 years, known quantity.
And that's kind of what
Not going
Dave
outside
talked
and
about.
Yeah.
When Dave
right.
talked about level of trust and experience.
Right.
And I think management government is for, I mean, the reason why there's only 2 out of 87 counties is size. I just don't, I mean, I'd like to see who wants to just knock that off so we can get rid of one of the bears.
I mean,
Get
yeah,
down to
you go to like Hennepin County and they've got the whole Hennepin County Medical Center and they've got all their park systems and there's a lot there. They have 40,000 employees.
I think they have special legislation for the operation of the county. I mean, so.
So I say knock manager off. Anyone else with me?
Yeah, yeah,
agree
no,
on that.
I think that consensus
I didn't
there,
hear an
think.
agreement on that. I
I'm
heard someone
sorry.
still talking about it, so I just want to knock it off.
Knock it off.
Yep.
Not in,
Okay, file that one.
So now let's be bold. Who wants to knock off coordinator?
Well, I mean, yeah.
Thank you.
I'm certainly landing on an administrator, but I was hoping to get more input from the group as what their thoughts
I
were.
never coordinator.
What's that?
Manager?
No, coordinator.
Oh, coordinator, right.
So you
Yeah,
don't
no, I'm-
support it, I don't support it.
I don't support it.
Coordinator.
Let's just move forward with an administrator here.
okay.
It sounds like it's unanimous.
It does. So what I think would be good, if it is unanimous, I'm like really.
Molly, let's
happy.
hug. You tried to ask this
But
question
I
before.
think we could put this on the agenda next week and just reaffirm that maybe in
So
about.
that our consultant knows what to do.
Yeah. If so, I will go ahead and put that on the agenda next week and let's affirm that. Okay, awesome. Congratulations.
Well, I just thought it was really
Thank
important.
you for your input, too.
I got some more for you.
Okay, okay. Well,
All right,
Definitely.
individually.
Picking up on something Heidi had said earlier, Commissioner Dukirk, excuse me. I'm never, I can call you Heidi.
Since you work together in the planning commission.
Yeah, you talked about this is a different place, a special place, it's a tourist place and how it grows. And those are concerns that your consultant needs to have, and whoever
Yes.
you hire needs to think about. I
Right.
mentioned Scott County. Scott County has Valley Fair, the Renaissance Festival, Canterbury Downs. That's a special county in its own way. It's an entertainment district. Literally hundreds of thousands of people would come into that county, and it creates special things, and you have to deal with that. Here you have a different sort of thing, but it's something to be considered in who comes here. It's not it's a different kind of a county.
We have a
We are a
charter.
little unusual, aren't we?
We have a tourism tax. I mean, we have Visit Cook County, that's our economical basis. And so, going through one of the frustrations, I'm gonna bring up a swear word in here, and I'm gonna say, border to border. Our previous administrator would constantly say, not our issue, we need to stay out of it. Well, sometimes we need to get into things that aren't any of our business and just have a discussion about it. And we needed an administrator that's gonna come in and have the tough discussions with us and get things out on the table and deal with it and be done with it. And so,
I agree.
we need a different kind of administrator. We have different needs and requests here and things that we have to work through. And, just the general form of government and how administrators work, that might work in other communities that just continue to function along and have done the same thing for 30 years. But we have different topics we have to address here, and we have different needs, and we can't just say, well, that's not our problem, and shove it aside.
Somebody will make it our problem.
Well, I'm sorry that I feel like I was holding us back at our last meeting because I wanted to get everyone on the same page. And I really appreciate having this information in multiple formats, from multiple sources. and the statute. It just really lays it right out there and makes everything, I think, crystal clear. So.
See, and I read statutes and I'm not confusing after I read those.
Well, it wasn't
Glad they're
just the
clear for you.
statute. That's actually, that's what I read last, actually. It was first in the back, and then I went back to that last, but I just wanna, I'm just appreciative of everyone's patience with me, and,
I don't think it was you, Dave, because I think that Molly asked us how we felt, and we didn't get a straight answer out of more than one person. So I think this needed to happen.
yeah, okay.
It did.
Don't feel like it's all your fault.
I don't think it's a bad thing to reaffirm a direction that most of you weren't here when that decision was made. To just make sure that that's still the direction you want to go.
That's
I don't
perfect.
think there's anything wrong with that.
Caution is always good.
I think that makes a lot of
Take
sense.
your time.
It's just my default to apologize, so don't take that too seriously either.
It's accepted.
Yeah.
Humility is really a good asset to have.
And you've given us more time to think about it, thank you.
Yeah, well, I think it's a good
Thank
discussion.
you.
Yeah, it's a good discussion.
Humble people should be proud.
Okay, so,
Jenny, can I say one more thing, then I'm gonna leave you alone, I'm gonna get out of here.
it's fine, no.
I'm just gonna give you the perspective I hear in the community, and you probably hear the same thing, I don't know if you do. But, you know, I've heard numerous times it said, well, that's the commissioner's job to supervise these department heads. And maybe it once was. But you don't have, sorry folks, you don't have the expertise to do that. Who can tell Molly what to tell them? If you don't have the expertise to do that, not that administrators are able to tell you what to do, you're elected, so you want to do what you want.
I
But
said that at
you-
the last meeting, we don't
I
have
think
the
that, I
skill
think what
set.
happens here though is it's a communication issue, that somehow you need to get the word out there that this is not about spending money to hire somebody so we don't have to do our job. This is about hiring someone who can operate and make the county work effectively and save you some money. That's what you're trying to do, right? Trying to have a better government for the citizens. And there's a lot of people that don't see that. They just think, we got some lazy commissioners. Let's hire somebody to do the work. And it's not real. You know it's not real. But people think that out there. So somehow in your communication to the public, there's a message there.
Thank you, and I'll just follow up and read for the public the information we have here, maybe it's 45. Leadership roles and responsibilities. This came from a work group with AMC. Level 4 leadership, looking at the big picture, the county's vision, goals, values, and overall work culture. Level 3 leadership, developing overall strategies and allocating resources to achieve the goals. Level 2 leadership, the overall management of the workforce and day-to-day activities. Level 1 leadership, the daily action of county employees. Then the next page, the commissioner's primary job is to provide leadership at levels 3 and 4, which is looking at the big picture, developing overall strategy, and allocating resources. And I think that's what we really have to keep saying, and I think we have to remind ourselves as we go through this process that that is going to be our expectations. And we do definitely have a very strong role, because we supervise that administrator's work and they report to the county board. So I think that's the distinction, is that whatever form of, we call that office, that administrative level, they still report to the board. And we do need to take that seriously. And so, I think they always told us in AMC, our introduction, fly at 10,000 feet, don't meddle in micromanaging, and leave that micromanaging to the administrator, but that overall leadership still belongs with the commissioners.
And I think maybe part of why that's out there is both the history, this is still fairly new for our county, but also, I don't know, there's a lot of people in our community that are living this day to day, and struggling to stay here, and struggling to come in here and raise a family. And so I don't know how much energy they have to look at the big picture. And so that's a whole nother framework to try to, understand that kind of vision and goal setting. So it's just a whole nother modality. And so it's the burden's on us to communicate
our role, and wait for somebody to say that communication.
Yeah,
Okay, I said enough to you folks.
Thank you.
Thanks for the input.
You know, in communication in the next level, we pick administrative government, we still as a board need to train and know what our role is. You know, the failure of the last administrator is the functionality of the commissioners. So if we want to keep this next administrator, we as a group have to figure out how we're going to do that and make it work.
I think the expectations and understandings, we've got to be on the same page. All of us.
I think one of the things that we heard a lot in the last 3 years is you hired an administrator to save money. And that the administrator was hired before I was elected. And where did that come from?
To save money, well, it saves money in strategic planning. It doesn't save money in staffing, and maybe that's the disconnect, is people assumed we would save money in the staff budget, but it's an overall, what are we watching? I mean, we got our big white elephant sitting up there that we keep having to fix and put money into and repair and,
It's,
you know.
yeah, it's hard to measure that because you guys are, you said, developing the overall strategy, and that's gonna be the same whether you have an administrator or not, but you implement those hopefully more efficiently. It's not that you're not gonna do those things whether you have an administrator or not, it's the same. So hopefully these do it better, but that's hard to measure because you don't have, you're not doing the same thing with and without, so you can't compare.
And it's gonna take 20 years to see. If we go back to 1989 and look at the levy, and we went from 0 to 20%, 17%, 12%, 3%, 5%, and this administrator finally turned us around, yeah, it was incredibly painful, and there was a high spot, but hopefully now we will be between 4 and 6, like we said, for the next 20 years. That's where the savings is. That's where the stability is.
And I also think there's so many contingencies that can develop. You know, I mean, something comes up and we lose our federal funding. You know, and we either partially or cut budget or raise our levy. I mean, to make that promise, I would never do that. Nor would I defend it. There's just too many variables and too many things that can happen. But I think to have a better government for the common good, yes, I think. But here again, things need to work well.
I will 100% defend it because other counties have done it and it's working and they've stayed at it, and we've seen with our possible loss in field funding that it's working, that we're staying 4 and 6 and getting an administrator to come and talk us through that.
I think sometimes when you use something like cost savings to justify a decision, it's going to get you in trouble almost every time. Maybe there's cost avoidance, maybe there's better planning, maybe there's stability, but I think when, back in the day when they were trying to justify a bigger expense of having an administrator, you know, somebody said, yep, they'll save us money. And sometimes they will and sometimes they won't.
So here's the interesting thing. Some people have said, go back to when we had Janet Simon as our board secretary. The wage we hired Jeff at to start was lower than the wage that she made her last year here. Think about that.
Well, realistically, I think whatever we decide in terms of how our government's run with the administrator, we have to be realistic on the salary too, and be fair, and you know where they're moving to. And we have a demography that we just sent out to people. And probably a map with a little star showing where we are, because we aren't a suburb of Minneapolis. Because this location is really important to people, where they're coming to.
Based on the job description and the scoring, I mean, that sets the range for us.
Well, and I think the consultant can help us with that.
Sure.
Because-
I'd be interested in what is an appropriate range. know, it's a whole thing about how big of a net do you want to cast, and if you're way out of line and too low, you're going to cast a very shallow net, unless you find that special person that might want to do it, but then, I mean, statistics are something to pay attention to. Probability of getting someone is just going to diminish. But then again, we can't afford to pay with Hennepin County. That's not the expectation. So I think the consultant will help us with that a lot. I noticed that we didn't change it on our profile from
No.
in that period of time. I thought, oh, buckets.
Well, it was only a year apart, those two.
A year.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, those two were just about a year and 4 months apart, so
Yeah.
profile didn't change.
And we hadn't done the comp study, we hadn't done the adjustment to wages. I mean, there's a lot of things that have happened since the last time we posted.
Mhm.
The point's well taken, and we have a scoring system that we can look at. Is that current job description, I mean, the current pay that we paid based upon that scoring system?
What will happen
No,
is the
not-
job description will go through personnel.
Right, oh, no, but the
Then
list
it'll be
on the
scored.
previous one was before we had a current pay
Yes,
scale.
okay.
Yeah,
So that was much lower than what it is now.
yeah. So it'll go through
Okay,
personnel
so,
and
I
it'll
mean,
get updated.
I guess my question is that, would that serve some purpose, or would that drive the purpose of the salary decision? In other words, are you going to use scoring, or are we going to look at what the market is?
I think that probably the scoring and the wage that we set it when we did the comp study is more reflective of the market than what we had before.
Okay, thank you. That
Don't you
sounds
think
good.
that's true?
That's what I was trying to say until it was
Yeah.
interrupted. It wasn't you.
I was just reading your brain, that's all.
I know you were reading my brain.
Okay, so anything else we want to discuss? Otherwise, you'll be ready for Tuesday?
Ready for Tuesday?
Okay. So, something I forgot to put on the agenda for today, Brady and I both forgot it. We had a conversation with Mariah the other day, apparently, and I wasn't in the meeting with her before, but somebody had asked her about possibility of changing the format for a meeting like Truth and Taxation to see if there was a less adversarial way we could have that kind of meeting. Were any of you aware of that?
Yes.
Did we have this
Yeah.
discussion during?
Yep.
So Brady and I were Brady and I, neither one were in that conversation, but we were the ones on the phone with her the other day.
Perfect.
And
That's the best way.
So I don't know how we want to start this, Brady, but she was suggesting something quite dramatically different. And we decided to bring it here because we weren't quite sure how it would work. It would be more like people sitting in tables rather than in rows, having small group conversations that are facilitated, have a very short presentation on truth and taxation to begin with, and then it would go to maybe small group facilitation, and maybe a couple of other ways to solicit feedback from people.
And legally, we just have to hold the meeting and present the budget as we have it
And allow the public to speak.
and allow the public to speak.
So this was taking away
It's kind of broadening the scope.
it was not having public comment at a microphone in front of a group that's sitting at a table, but more allowing them to speak in small groups in a more facilitated way. Brady and I weren't quite sure how that would, it felt like a pretty dramatic difference.
So would we move it to the community center so we would have more area to do those group discussions? We did it for when the DNR came here and did the border-to-border route, that's how they did it. They set maps out on tables and different
I
groups
think
got
the
together.
preliminary question before we talk about where it should happen is whether it should happen that way.
Yeah.
Right, but I mean, if we do it to allow more people to come in and be part of that, we would need a bigger area. I mean, it worked when we did that. Like, I was able to go table to table and listen to the different discussions, and it was,
And I guess the question Brady and I had was, not that that isn't a good style to do a meeting, I like that style of meetings, but is the truth and taxation meeting the right meeting to do that with? Or should we do it on the next whatever subject that we're talking about instead.
Because right, it's a subject.
Like a
Yeah,
heading.
or maybe there's something in between, like,
Yeah, like
we
that
allow
should have
people to
been.
come in and make comments, you know, maybe, you know, like we have Post-its, or we have some other kind of facilitated activity, but not do it as completely as I said. We were, I don't know, maybe Brady.
I like the way you're describing it and doing it, but I think that type of process or input on the budget should have been done sooner in the process.
That's kind of what
Like,
we were thinking,
I-
it's kind of sailed already.
I absolutely hate truth in taxation because I feel like the public believes that that is the meeting in which they can tell us what to do and we're going to do what they say. When actuality, we've already set the maximum levy, we've done all the work, we've reviewed the budget, and it's too late. It's too late to just take the levy from 6% to 1% because
Yeah.
people are struggling. We know people are struggling.
I said the exact same thing in the conversation was, it felt like it was like the ship, in many cases, already sailed, so people came in and did you know, really came up with ideas and changes and whatever, that it was like, how would you even possibly implement those in the
In
3
2
weeks that you have, you know?
Mhm.
So,
I agree with what Heidi was saying, that we would have to do, I think, when we go to that format, you always have to build towards something. You just don't go from here to here and say, wow, because, so somehow or the other, through other processes or other meetings, you can work on those kinds of things, but just, it could be really,
Very dramatic.
well, yeah, I mean, it could be, it could be really problematic because of just the sudden change of the culture that's established, and I think they have a right to come and complain. I mean, quite frankly, if they don't like it, then this is their chance, and, but I think it'd be a worthwhile thing to do, but it's gonna require some development.
I think the other part of her conversation was continuing work on maybe the way we do public comments in general, just to be more, you know, thank you for, you know, like less stoic and maybe ask questions, clarifying questions, or things that let people know we're listening to them. So
I
she,
liked her suggestion of reflection, which we
Uh-huh.
haven't implemented, in which we
Right.
have that discussion after the
Right.
public comment. And there's gotta be some way we can do truth in taxation. I mean, I don't wanna be an ass and say to the public, I'm glad you're here and we're listening to you, but we're not gonna do anything about what you say. That's not okay. But that's basically what truth in taxation is. So how do we make it a conversation? And yes, it's a place for people to tell us that they're frustrated and angry, but what good does that do them or us? I mean, it's not even public comment anymore, it's public attack, personal attacks.
Well, I think if we
And it's
work on
'cause they're-
civility and respect, and, you know, that's something we've adopted, and we have to work on that.
But how do we do that? How do we make it a
I think we
conversation?
have to keep.
so I think the reflection is a good idea, and maybe it's like, can't do anything about this year, but maybe there's opportunities to take what people say and put it into our planning for the next year.
Yeah, I mean, if we're serious about something like that, I think we need to go to that discussion when we're in the formative stages of the budget.
Early on.
Yes, early on, and do it very methodically, maybe topic by topic or department by department. But I think that's gonna take some careful thought and planning.
And another issue with truth in taxation is it used to be a presentation of the budget, public comment, and then discussion of the board. And now when the public is done commenting, we adjourn. We don't get to discuss or talk or bounce off ideas of what the public has said to us. We just adjourn and walk out.
Well, maybe we could add that into, this would be, would you like to add that in? We can add that in to the agenda for it.
How would you approach that, title it, just?
We never titled it, I mean, it's just up to the board chair
You can
and.
just have, you know, board summary or something,
Or
board discussion. It
board
wouldn't have to
discussion,
be,
yeah.
you know.
After everyone's done.
Right.
Or
Board
set a
summary
time limit
comments.
or everything.
Well, set a time.
Yep.
So we make sure we take careful notes then, to address what they, I think it's gotten better though over the years. I remember when I first came on board, it was not pleasant. But I felt last year was such an improvement. Just the attitude that they came in, we didn't have all that many. And so if we build on the fact that we respect their opinion, that maybe have a discussion after everything is finished, they'll know then, oh yeah, they did hear us. So that's a small step. But it has improved.
Why don't we add that to the
Okay.
agenda?
Let's do that. Okay.
When are we gonna get an update on the budget?
Essentially, nothing's changed.
So we set the max levy and we're not working on trying to bring it down.
We have some meetings, I
Hmm?
think. They haven't done any other meetings.
We've been on pause because of PILT.
We haven't heard anything, yeah, I haven't heard any news.
I think what Bobby's asking is have any of the department heads gone back and looked at their budgets for any changes, is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Well, speaking in a dual role here as a department head, nobody asked us to do that. You know, I mean, submitted a budget based on what I felt like my expenses are for next year.
Mhm.
And, you know, nobody asked any questions about it. Nobody, you know, so my assumption is it's okay. But, so if the board wants us to do that, someone, I think, probably needs to tell us that. Otherwise, our assumption, I think, is that we've submitted a reasonable budget that the board agrees with.
And the things that the board can ask is, some departments have changes, you know, that back, in addition, you know, possible staff changes or equipment requests or things like that you can ask for. I can tell you historically, we had a year where the commissioners asked the department heads to reduce their budget by 5%. And what the department heads did was, you know, it's an estimation of expense, an estimation of income. And to get that 5%, they just adjusted their income and expenses and made the window a lot tighter, so there was no room for give or flexibility. You know, asking for an overall drop, to me, just didn't work. It backfired immensely. So for us, we can look at our budgets and see what the additional requests are, and we can say, you know, can you put it off another year? Can you wait? One of the things that was done in history that Brady and I have talked about over the years is you could have a mandatory no employee works over 36 hours a week. That's how you reduce the budget. I mean, those are the things that we can do. I don't know that we're in a crisis that we have to do that, but that is an opportunity.
I'd say that the board agrees on the budget is false because it was a 3-2 vote on the levies.
Maximum levy.
Yeah.
I voted against the maximum levy. And I will say that I did not see anything in the budget requests that I had an issue with or that I disagreed with. My vote against the levy was that I think that when we as a board make promises to the community, that in order to continue to build and keep trust with the community, we should honor those promises, whether they were made by previous boards or not. I'm really sick and tired of the I wasn't here, I didn't make that decision, so I don't have to stick to it. So that's why I voted against it. I'm comfortable with it. I know it'll affect seasonal homeowners and commercial businesses differently. For the homestead owners, I fully understand that they will have a reduction in their taxes on their county levy, and that makes sense. If we hadn't made a promise to the community that we would keep our levy below 6%, I would have voted for it. So I don't have an issue with the department head's requests.
So the request is 5.05.
Six.
But that was, but the presentation to us was a 5.05, wasn't it?
5.1 was what I had.
5.1, that was 5 point. So my understanding was 5.1, let's just use that, that was what that's what we were sitting at as far as department heads and submittals.
Nope, department heads were at 4.
But we added percent because of the uncertainty of 5, like, okay.
No,
correct
the
me.
department head's budget request is just over 4%. Then when we were in the discussions and received that, I asked us to go to 5% to have a little wiggle room. And then we got the information about PILT and the other reductions and the possible changes. And then Brady put together what the cost would be to a homestead and found that at 6.05%, it would still be a reduction in your county taxes for a homestead. And the budget committee was comfortable with that and brought it to us. But the department head request is just over 4%.
Okay, thank you.
And part of that was two things. The ones that put it over the 4% in expenditures were the building fund, or all of the things that,
Right.
unmet needs.
And that got us to 6.
That,
5.
along with starting a building reserve.
Right, got us to 5.05.
Yeah, so we added, that got us to the 6.05. Yeah, that's what got approved in the proposal, was the 6.05.
Because of the 6.05, we could do that reserve. That was the process, as I
That
understand.
got us a little bit of reserve, a couple hundred
To
thousand.
deal with building issues, okay.
But taking a few more steps back, Jeff had asked us what kind of direction staff is looking for. And I think we said, without voting, to toe the line, but put some of the building fund.
Right.
And I feel like staff did that pretty well. I don't know if we want to, we didn't ask them to make cuts, we just wanted them to keep it tight. And then, so this is just coming from my perspective, so then that building fund was put in there, but then because of the uncertainty with PILT, and honestly, I think for planning for 2021, that we want to start thinking about that, and so that's why I was hoping to go beyond that 5.1, is to plan for 2021. Because we don't know what's going to happen with the PILT, and so that's where I was liking the 6 until we hear about what the PILT's going to do this year. Then we'll know about 2021. You know, so in my mind, that's kind of what things are hinging on, is between the 5.1 and the 6. So
And if the bill doesn't change, so then we're just gonna continuously be 6.
Well, that depends on, you know, that depends on strategic planning. Do we want to have money in the building fund, or do we want to take it out? I mean, that is up to us to do that. I mean, if you have a strong argument that we shouldn't plan ahead and set that aside because we have other resources, then we're willing to listen to you talk about that.
And we got an additional partial payment for the PILT this year, but we can't count on that for next year. And so if we don't do 6 this year and there's no change to PILT, next year it would be more than 6 for sure. You know, that would be like 8, 9, I don't know, but just off the bat.
But we do have some retiring debt service this year too.
Yeah, and that, well, that's the other thing that helped us this year.
Yeah.
So like, that's why I'm saying, if we want to keep 2021 and beyond a little more level, a level 6%.
Yeah, exactly, that's what I'm saying.
But that's.
If you feel comfortable, keep bringing that to your people who you in.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It would be more than that if we didn't do that this year. That's why it's just like, because we've got that double benefit of the retiring debt and the partial PILT. So that's why I was like, oh man, I'd rather.
And if we don't get the hit, Bobby, and we stay at 6 this year, there's the possibility of 4 or 5 for next year. You know, going up to 6 is to cover those spots, but what if we can get it down to 5 in the future?
Well, I think if I could add, you know, once we find out better, if we ever do, from the feds, or at least more consistency, you know, if we're facing some real deficits in our funding, I would suggest at that point, when we're more confident that this doesn't look good, we're going to have to look at those next 9 years and say, okay, how are we going to mitigate this? And I think it has to be a combination of maybe increases and or reductions. And then we have to go through a process of saying what are our priorities. You know, and I think we as commissioners, this is where it's going to be important for us to express our concerns. You know,
Mhm.
probably gonna, how does this affect our people and our services? And, you know, so I would encourage, I don't know if I'll be around, but somebody will be around at that point in time if we know better, you know.
There's a letter going out today to the Department of Agriculture, a 2-page letter,
Mm.
signed by everyone in the 3 counties. So it's,
Supposed to have a response
For-
by the end of the month.
For Ty Blatnick?
Yeah, I got it
Mhm.
yesterday evening,
Mhm.
and they wanted to know if Jenny was okay with it. I can send that to everybody.
Oh,
We'll send it.
It's not in German.
If there's gonna be a twofold issue going on, you know,
It's just another nudge, Evan. Sorry,
is there gonna be legislation if it doesn't look good for, you know, changing what's on the table right now? Which would be reductions of 750,000 a year, 7 million over the next, you know.
Did the other county
Then
boards
that's gonna be
approve that?
another whole process we'll have to go through. We look at our planning, financial planning, but
They don't have the same rules we do.
I would hope that we try to look at that over the period of the
It's
next,
just-
whatever that is.
Hopefully it's,
Yes, but we've had an issue.
you know, it's,
Sorry.
we get it back. There's proposals out there that we even start to implement an increase from what we were getting, the small one. But I would hope we would start looking at, even if it just goes back to what we have, we start reserving some of that.
Yeah, going back to less than 20 years ago is ridiculous.
Well, I
Because
think-
we shouldn't rely on it for
We
our
don't want to
operations.
rely, it'd be nice to put that into, say, a building reserve, which is, it's great planning, not necessary frequently, because you can simply wait till the building's ready and then you bond for it. And you have an increase in your levy and wait for the next one. It's better in a long term to set it aside, but that's a way, to me, to get ready, having some of that. We're building a reserve for buildings, but if it does go away, you've got that. You can't build
That's
that
the
reserve
discussion we should have for 2020.
because it's being reduced, so you're,
Yeah.
you're planning for that.
Kind of hard to have a building reserve when everything goes up to the YMCA, repair that building.
Hey, now we're getting windows and a roof on this building.
It is fine.
Yeah, that's
Molly, the letter included more folks to know about this, so Senator Klobuchar, Senator Bob, Representative Egan, Pete Stauber, there's quite a list that they have for
I
the.
just forwarded
They
it
know
to you.
about it already, but I don't know, and you just forwarded it to
Yeah,
them?
it came in like 4:30 yesterday, and they wanted to know if
Does
Jenny
it
was
talk
okay.
about that?
They wanted to send it, so I'm sorry, that was my inexperience that didn't forward it to everybody.
Does it talk about the proposed legislation? Is that what it talks about?
No, no, it's just poking at them
Give them a
Give us
to
an
give us a
update.
good response, basically.
They've been meeting with some of our, especially our representatives in Congress and some of the senators. If this doesn't go through, then what kind of legislation could take place? And they are presenting some kind of formula that you would go back a certain amount of time in building and cost of living, but you really know more about that.
Yeah,
than I do.
we would go back to the 2008
Right.
value, kind of set that as the value, and then multiply it by an index
Each
each year.
So like cost of living.
And that could be then more consistency,
Right.
because it would be by law. Yeah, but I still think that Lily's
Yeah, it
suggestion is
wouldn't
good.
depend on this kind of false notion of valuing the boundary waters as a real estate transaction, which is.
Your suggestion sounds familiar. I don't know if you've made that.
Yeah,
Oh, you have made that suggestion
over the
before.
last 20 years, 26 years.
We started out doing that when we got the big increase, but we did it for a year. And over the next couple of years, we ended up, everything got put against levy, keep the levy down.
Keep
We
it at
hit-
zero.
Well, we hit the recession, like the board was really sympathetic to the public and we ended up doing it all. So,
Eventually it catches up.
Yeah.
well, things don't turn around as fast as you hope. Just just be a couple of years because a couple more.
Yeah.
And myself and Commissioner Newman, this opportunity at Transportation Alliance, Jim Hagerford was there, and he sits on the, he was the board. We thought about it after.
Good moment, he's pretty well spoken.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else?
We have the
Roll on to the bylaws.
You guys ready to move on? We're just gonna, I just printed the side guides.
Is this a different one?
Added to the- No, this is just the outline of the bylaws. I didn't know if you guys had them or not. I'll let Molly start this conversation.
There you go.
Thank you, Rena. So, bylaws have been kind of a matter of discussion, I think since 2016, because I just opened the file to try to find the most recent draft. That's what I found. But I think it's a good time to restart this discussion and begin to tackle rules of procedure for this board. And Rena asked me to talk about some of the benefits that I see of having a set rules for bylaws. And really, this is guidance for how you run your meetings, how you take action, how you take input from the public and from each other and from the staff. The bylaws that you were provided by Jeff Cadwell were basically Scott County's bylaws. It's like a 30-some page document. And I think that's useful to show one end of the spectrum, that you can comprehensively cover every single subject area. But we're starting with nothing. And I think that it's a big jump to expect us to fill out, 30 pages worth of details. And it would be better to start kind of with a basic discussion, which is why Rena has printed out just the table of contents from the Scott County bylaws, so that we can design kind of from the ground up what we want our bylaws to look like. Bylaws, once you get them agreed upon, are going to be a really good resource for yourselves and for new commissioners when they come aboard. Sections 1 through 4 in this model are all kind of the statutory obligations of the board condensed, right, and put into plain language. So I think that's valuable to have it all in one spot and easily accessible. It would be a good reference during meetings, before meetings. Bylaws are going to give you consistency in how you act, how as a board, so that it doesn't look different depending on which issue you're addressing. If it's a more controversial issue, it shouldn't be treated any differently than if it's a mundane issue. If the board composition is different one year than the next, it shouldn't change how the board considers motions and that sort of thing. I also think it's an issue of transparency. We talk about transparency as a value. One piece of that is that the public should know what to expect, should know, generally be able to predict how you're going to consider each issue. And when you have bylaws in writing that somebody can access, they can go down the list and say, okay, this motion is important to me. Now I see the process for how it's going to be considered. And it also lays out, these bylaws also lay out how the public can participate in your decision making, whether it's through committees or through the public comment period, that kind of thing. So that's something I think that should be out there in black and white for people to access and review on their own. So I believe that one way you could proceed, 1 through 4 here, as they are laid out in Scott County bylaws, like I said, are mostly statutory. I think a lot of this is going to would remain unchanged if you want to include it in your bylaws. But the real meat of this, where your board decisions would come in are section 5 rules of procedure and the sections after that.
I would add that I modified the Scott County outline just a little bit. If you look in section 4, I added letter O, video recording, as part of meetings, so that we
I
could
was looking at that.
clarify,
Saying 4 is not standard.
clarify how we're gonna do that, so that it's standard, you know, if it's any public
Yeah.
meeting or whatever we're gonna do.
And I think it's really briefly just addressed in broadcasting.
Yes,
by-
but maybe, but I just added that there as a point. And the other thing that I modified was number 8, which is county board committees. I modified that to look like the structure that was adopted with committee of the whole and the work groups that feed the committee of the whole. So I just made that modification to make it match more what we already sort of do.
I mean, in our work so far on the policy, we have been completely stuck in 4.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
We've been trying to work on the Scott County policy to make it ours. And when we go through page by page, we have gotten stuck in 4.
Okay.
So,
Rules of procedure, okay, thank you.
I mean, I think starting, it would be smart to start with the less controversial subjects. Address, you know, whether to record meetings, what public comment looks
That's
like.
been the most controversial part.
Right, and you stop there.
Yeah.
At the controversy. Let's start with some more basic stuff where we have consensus and can work together, make some progress. And
I
then
think-
gain some ground.
And when you say stop there, I would just like when we stop on something to not adjourn the meeting and leave. That has been the other issue. This is too hard, let's just stop.
And there are ways to make conversations easier and not more difficult.
Right, and I'm okay with moving past them and moving to something we can agree on, like we did today. Can we all agree on this? Can we all agree on that? And moving through it. It's just my frustration is we keep getting stuck and we just throw it
I
at
think-
bathwater.
I think what Molly and I talked about might be a reasonable approach is to go ahead and populate the parts of this that aren't controversial, that are mostly statute-based. And do that first, review it, make sure we're all good with that. And then, you know, just start picking off some of these sections. One of the areas that, you know, it was important to have the discussion we had earlier, is there's a section about the administrator's role. So, you know, getting that back in here, we needed to have that conversation before we could address that. And I think that area is going to continue to be addressed through the conversation you have with DDA over the next few weeks. So we see this as a process. We don't see it as here's a completed draft, you know, yay or nay. We see it as a conversation, one that may take a while. But I think it's valuable to go through this conversation and to do this step at a time. So that's what we're proposing.
So is that what are we gonna have additional meetings, or is this gonna be part of the committee of the whole?
I think we would maybe have it as a standing thing in the committee of the whole. We, you know, I mean, we could take it up in the general government area and bring it to the committee of the whole. But I sort of felt like probably everybody here would want to be involved in the conversation. So I'm thinking, well,
Could we add it to every board meeting and take a section and tackle it?
if you can see it that way, I see it more as a working thing. And then when we have a section, maybe we can approve it at the board. And
Well, if
then,
you add it-
work on the conversational ones at the committee of the whole.
Yes, we could, you know, one of the things that I guess would be good to consider, at least from my perspective, is that we go through some of these things and try to seek consensus. Rather than get right to a vote and then we got 3-2, 4-1. And, you know, and if we can work out some of the language so that we can all, you know, and sometimes we're not going to reach consensus, but I think seeking consensus is that what can you live with, you know,
Sure.
at a minimum. So I would suggest that we don't do it as part of a board meeting, it should be part of a work session.
Sure, and we can
Such
schedule
as that.
special work sessions.
Because I think that's something we really need to work on.
I do too. Along with strategic planning.
Right.
But I think this is really fundamental.
My concern with committee of the whole is they meet once a month and have other topics, and so it's gonna take us 2 years to get through this, whereas if we do add it to board meetings, you get 2 times a month.
Yeah, I just think that the board meeting is kind of more of a business meeting versus a work session. That's business. Needs to get done.
So maybe
So-
well, this is statutory too, so there's not a lot of wiggle room in terms of.
In the first 4 sections.
Yes.
There's not a lot of wiggle room.
Well, that could be one session.
With the
Yeah.
description of membership, description of regular meeting.
Yeah, we would populate
Yes.
sections 1 through 4 and say, any questions about this, is anything missing? And then move on. And the other, 6 and 7, what is a resolution, what is an ordinance? Those are pretty set in stone. There's not gonna be a lot of controversy about that. There might be more discussion on general consensus under 6 and policy development, but, I mean, I think we're only gonna be picking out 1 or 2 topics from each section that are, really need to be discussed.
That's where I didn't understand. I was fairly comfortable with Scott County's, just that there was some details to work out, so I'm not entirely clear how this would be any different, except for starting over.
I think we could use that as a discussion, just maybe pick another one too. I think we had another one in there for a
We
while,
had like 3 or 4.
Itasca or something.
Yeah.
But I really think the crux of it is going to be, for our purposes, is 5, rules of procedure. And that's something that I think would be a work in progress kind of thing.
And it may not be hard. This may not be that hard. It may move along pretty quickly. But
It just didn't feel like presenting the 30-page thing
Right,
to
that was
the
difficult.
board was creating much progress or much conversation.
Mhm,
It
mhm,
seemed
mhm.
like that was an overwhelming prospect
Mhm.
or otherwise just wasn't effective for getting work done. So,
You're right.
and we're bringing it to you in this form so that we can talk about what's the best way to proceed, what way do you want to move forward, and then we can bring it back.
Thank you.
Mhm.
It helps, it does help to break it down. I think it's, in my mind, we just have to identify any controversial areas.
So simple.
And then, maybe pull that aside and then look at the rest and then, okay, and then we can tackle that. I think that's more or less what you're saying, but differently.
Well, we're just, it's the old adage, how do you eat an elephant?
Right.
Bite at a time. I think when Molly and I looked at this, we both feel that bylaws are important. So how do we do it in a way that builds consensus, number one, that we all agree that these are the way we want, the rules that we want to operate under. But 2, to make sure that everybody understands what they're voting on and what it is that it means when we adopt something. And that's some things we don't have choices in, but the ones that we do, we should have a good discussion on, make sure. So it seemed like a reasonable approach to break it down a little bit from the way we saw it, rather than come in and say, here, this is what we think is a good idea.
Right. And that's not where we started from. I mean, we had multiple options, and we went all the way through those and picked Scott County because it was the one that covered what we wanted, and then we started going through it. But I mean, we could just like with deciding if we want administrative government, we can start all over and address everything because we have new people at the table because it's taken us so long to do it that people are not hearing them. Because Dave, I don't think you were here when we started.
I've always been.
He's the newbie.
In spirit.
He likes to apologize.
So do you want us to populate sections 1 through 4 and come back?
Yes, please.
What we could do is also kind of highlight areas where it seems like it would be natural, there would be discussion to bring it to your attention.
I don't think we have a meeting in December. No, because of our scheduling going to St. Cloud. So, but you could still get it to us
Yep, and you could start
and
reviewing
start
it and
reading it
ask if
over
you have
and be ready for
questions.
January.
Yep.
Send the whole 30 pages and then I'll just focus on.
Sure.
I think as long as it's statutory, I'd really like your take on it.
Mhm.
Because you've been here and you know how we operate, so I would encourage you, if others are okay with it, to adapt any kind of language that you think
Oh,
would
yeah.
be
Yeah, I mean,
appropriate from a legal point of view.
Review 1 through 4, because I don't know what version, what year their bylaws were created, what this draft is from. And it's possible that some of those statutes have changed in the last couple of years. I don't know if that is significant changes. We wouldn't want to publish the old version of anything.
There might be something that's not that pertinent to us or pertinent to us at all.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that's right.
Because of
That's
the
right.
nature of our council,
Sure.
I ask that you
Mhm.
take a look at that.
It always brings up the other issue is how do you keep them fresh? You know, what's the process for?
It's really hard to adopt someone else's because especially if they went through a process,
Mm-hmm.
there's just different real characteristics and dynamics and people and.
Yeah, and frankly, you're not working hard enough to think about it, you know, if you're just adopting somebody else's.
Good point.
Where's the ownership, I guess?
Mhm. Okay,
Nicole, that's what we wanted to bring up today.
great. Well, thank you on that, Molly. Anything else? Okay. We will adjourn our meeting and look forward to good stuff in the new year.
Now, do we call the order of the special meeting?
You need a
Oh.
motion to close.
Oh, that's right.
For a closed session.
I move that we close this
And I have to turn this off.
session
Yeah, but why
and
don't
go
you,
to executive.
Do we close it though, because we adjourned the committee of the whole?
We have to open a closed meeting.
what you need for purposes of
Oh,
open
excuse
meeting
me.
law is a motion that requests a closed session and best practices to reference exactly why it should be closed. So you want to reference attorney-client communication on the National Prescription Opioid litigation.
Yes, I said
So moved.
I said my question wrong. We adjourned committee of the whole, but the chair has not opened a new meeting.
Well, it
So we're
didn't
not.
have time yet.
Yes, so that's what I meant. Do we have to open a
Oh,
meeting?
so that you can hear the motion.
So that a motion could be made, because we're just making a motion not inside of a meeting.
Yeah, it was a separate meeting.
Yes, it's a
Yep.
separate meeting, but we haven't called the meeting to order.
This is so fun.
So can I turn
Yes,
the,
waiting for that.
I'll turn the video off.
Yeah, please. Did we get something, Myron?
No, I'll make